Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's masterclass. So today we're going to see about building an effective IT asset management strategy with the cloud version of ServiceDesk Plus. So my name is Nikhil. I'm from the product support team, and I'm going to be the presenter for today. A quick heads up on the agenda for today. We're going to discuss about what an asset management is and explain why it is necessary in an organization. We're going to see the fourfold benefits of having an ITAM strategy, discuss the 6 essentials of IT asset management from Service Desk Plus. And as we see the fourfold benefits and the 6 essentials, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration on how IT asset management made all the difference to an institution. So why do all of us fuss about IT asset management? So let's take a look at the fourfold benefits of IT asset management. So to start off, you need to understand and have a clear visibility on what assets you own in an organization. By assets, I don't just mean the workstation. It includes the workstations, the printers, the scanners, and any type of IT or a non-IT asset, including a virtual machine, should be identified and it should be visible in your organization. And the number of requests which are created for these assets, right? For example, if an asset is goes under repair, the IT asset management team decides then if the asset has to be either replaced or repaired, right? So the end users will create a request for this, and thereby the IT asset management would link with the other ITIL processes as well. So let's take a look at how the associations happen as we go through the demo. We all know that audits are very important in all aspects. For example, if you want to identify any cracked software which is installed in an organization user's machine, or if you want to identify a prohibited software, that could be a security breach, or it could possibly be against your organization's policy. So in order to stay compliant, you should ensure that you have the IT asset management set up, and you could also optimize your assets usage. You could control unwanted spendings in an organization by having a proper item in place. So Service Desk Plus brings you 6 IT asset management essentials with which you can manage distributed assets. You could improve your security posture with IT asset management, and you could face audits like a boss at any point of time. By distributed assets, I mean assets which fall in different geographic locations. So we should make sure that everything is discoverable and it is, you know, uh, and it is available in a centralized location where you could track what is going on, right? So let's take a look at how this can be possible. Discovering your IT assets and building your inventory. So you could make use of multiple discovery techniques to identify assets or devices which fall either within your home network or outside your home network. So for instance, given today's scenario, all of us or even most of us would be working from outside our home network. So how do you ensure that our devices are being scanned and our latest data is being updated in Service Desk Plus Cloud? Let's take a look in just a moment. And with the help of different discovery techniques or different scanning techniques, you could also identify the assets detail and classify your assets. So with that, I'm going to take you to the application as a technician. So this is the setup, and under probes and discovery, you have the probe option. So a probe is a lightweight executable file which can be downloaded and installed in any Windows Server 2008 or higher operating system, or a Windows 7 or a higher operating system. All right, so once you download a probe, you could add a probe from this section, have your probe name, and have a site associated. For example, a Singapore site. So if I want to, identify my assets which are located in Singapore, I could create a probe, mark it against the site called Singapore, and initiate a scan. So all the devices which would be pulled by the probe or which would be discovered by the probe would automatically have the Singapore site associated to the assets, right? So this is the basic setup of an asset. So once you download the asset, you click on show key after adding the asset and register the probe, after which you could perform either a domain scan or a network scan. To add a new domain, click on new domain, choose your probe which you have just created, for example, the US probe. At any point of time, you could add a probe from this button as well. You could add in your domain name, your domain controller, your logon credentials, and you could publish your base DN right here. So what this does is the probe will get in touch with all the computers which fall within this particular filter, which is object class equals computer. And if you want to enable the software scan for the machines which are being discovered by the probe, you could enable the software scan for your Linux or Mac machines by enabling this option right here. And similar to your domain scan, you also have a network scan. So this is how a completed domain scan would look like. So you need to publish the base in here and you're all set. So right here you have the gear icon from which you could initiate the scan. So this is how you initiate a domain scan. So similar to domain, you also have a network scan from which you could add a new network and choose to say if you want to either scan the entire network, or is it just a specific set of IP ranges which you're going to scan. You also have an option to exclude devices based on the IP range or a single IP address or using the host name as well. So once again, in the network scan, you go ahead and choose the probe, and you go ahead and choose your credentials which are required for these machines which are being scanned. So let's say, for example, you are scanning machines in chunks or scanning networks in chunks, and each and every single network would have a different admin credentials, for example. So in that case, what happens is you get to choose your admin credentials from this list. So you could add your credentials right here and add them to your network scan. If you have some predefined credentials under the credential library, you could go ahead and choose them just by clicking right here and choosing them from the drop down list. So it's not just for Windows, you could do that for your Linux, Mac, and your SNMP supported devices such as your printers, routers, switches, etc., and your VMware as well. And similar to your domain scan, if you want to enable software even in your network scan, you could go ahead and enable the software scan for your Linux and Mac machines. And the credential can be stored under the credential library, which is more like a credential repository. So you could add a new credential depending on the credential type, and you could save your administrative credentials here, so that as and when you configure your your new networks, you could just click on the credential which would be required and proceed with your scan. So this is how you make use of the probe in order to scan your domains and networks to identify your assets which could fall within your home network. Now, how do you identify devices which are outside your home network? So under probes and discovery, you do have settings, and we have an option here called scan script. So under scan script, we do have two downloadable files. So one is again a lightweight executable file, which is a cellscan.exe, and a scanscript.sh. So for Windows, you could make use of the exe format, and for Linux, you could make use of the scanscript.sh. And as and when the scan scripts are being used, you could use it as either a logon script or as a startup script. And as and when people are logging into their machines, the latest data of the asset, including the softwares, would be scanned and it would be pushed to the ServiceDesk Plus Cloud application, right? So if a probe is unreachable, and if you still want to go ahead and initiate a scan through the scan script, that can be done by clicking this option here and by making use of the API key. So this is how you could discover your machines using different discovery techniques for the assets which fall within your home network and outside your home network. Now, how do you classify these assets? So the probe does it for you. So as and when the probe initiates a scan, and if it identifies a printer or a router or even a server in this case, you could expect the devices to fall within the respective brackets right here. So under the asset module, you do have IT as an option, and within which you have various filters or various buckets. As and when devices are being scanned, it'll fall within the respective bucket. For example, if a printer is scanned or if a switch or a router is scanned, it would fall within the respective filters right here. And if workstations are identified, it would fall within the workstation bucket. If workstations fail the scan, they would be populated under the unaudited workstations. So these are IT assets which are available. So similar to IT assets, you could also track non-IT assets in the application manually. And you also have an option to track virtual hosts and VMs under this particular filter or bucket right here. So what if you want to add some customizable or your own custom product types, which is visible right here. So right here, when you click on IT, you do see a dashboard with various product types which are available and the information of how many such devices are available within each bracket, right? So if you want to create your own type of product, so that can be possible by navigating to setup, and under customization, you do have asset management as one of the options. So right here, you have product types from which you could see the list of product types which are predefined, and you would be able to add your own product types at any point of time based on your preference as well, right? So that's how you build your inventory. You configure different network scans or domain scans, and identify devices which fall within your home network. Make use of the scan script to scan devices outside the home network. And as the scan is being performed, the classification is done automatically for you. Right. So now once the assets are in place, how do you track assets using different using different states? So asset states are dynamic, right? So how do you ensure that you could track your assets? So you could create or make use of this life cycle to ensure that your assets are in place. So the life cycle starts off by an end user requesting for an asset, or let's say a new asset. So in that case, the end user would raise a new service request, and that service request would be tied to various approvals. On reception of the right approvals, you could ensure that the IT technician teams, or the asset teams, asset technicians, would deploy the asset and ensure that the asset is being used. This is a scenario where the assets are already in your organization, readily available to deploy for the users. So what if there is a scenario where you do not have stock of assets, and if you would still need to procure the assets? So you could make use of the purchase module, which is available in ServiceDesk Plus Cloud. You could create a new purchase order. You could list the item which you want to order, and you could send it for an approval. So once your purchase order has been approved, right? Once it's marked as approved, you could click under actions and receive the items. So you could either partially receive the items or completely receive the items, depending on what you're ordering and what's the quantity. And as and when the devices are being received, or the assets are being received, they would fall within the asset management module, and they would be available right here. So if you want to track different states in an asset, so as and when a device enters Service Desk Plus, it would be in the in-store state, right? So from in-store, if you want to ensure that somebody is using the asset, you could click here at the in-store drop-down, or you could also click on this particular drop-down which says state right here, this particular option. So on clicking this, you would receive a pop-up in which you could change different asset states. From in-store, if somebody is using it, you could mark it in in-store, and you could assign either a user, or you could assign a department as well. You could also associate this to another asset if required, and you could go ahead and save this. So as and when you assign a user, and when you click on save, a user would be associated to this particular asset, and the user's information would be available on the right panel of your asset which you're working on or which you're adding, right? So what if this user is using the asset, and at any point of time, if the user faces some sort of an issue, right? So they could go ahead as an end user and report an issue being a requester from their self-service portals, right? And as and when a request is being raised, the IT technicians or the asset management team could check, and they could either mark the status as in repair if the asset is in repair, or if the asset has an agreement and if the agreement expires, they could change the state from in repair or in use to expired. Or if they feel that the asset is no longer in use, or if the asset is probably damaged, right, they could go ahead and change the state from expired or whatever current state is it is in to disposed, right? You also have an opportunity to change the site as well. So once you save this particular asset as disposed, it means it's no longer in use, right? So this is how you could make use of various states. So states in the application are completely customizable. So you could go ahead and add your own states similar to the in-store, in-use, expired, and disposed states which we have. So you can create your own life cycle if required, or you could follow one such simple life cycle to ensure that your asset states are dynamic and that you follow a regular process in tracking your assets, right? The next essential which we are going to talk about today is managing softwares and licenses in one single place. So to start off, you need to ensure that all your IT assets are known and that they are brought into ServiceDesk Plus Cloud. And how can that be done? It can be done using various scanning techniques which we spoke about and by using the scan scripts. So once that is done, the assets will fall in ServiceDesk Plus Cloud. And with that, you could expect the softwares to be also listed along with the basic assets information. So assets would have the hardware information, the memory, the RAM, ROM, etc. Right. So apart from that, you can also expect the probe to scan the softwares. If you have enabled the scan for your Linux or Mac machines, you will get the information. And as and when devices are scanned, the softwares would be populated within Services Plus Cloud, and you could run an audit at any point of time to ensure that you are compliant. And how do you do that? So let's take a quick look again at the asset management module. So when you navigate to assets, on the left panel, you would see software as one of the options, right? So when you navigate to software, you would be able to view the list of softwares which are predefined by the scan or which are detected by the scan in all the machines. Or when you navigate to any specific asset, right? For example, if you navigate to a workstation and let's say it's a production server, for example. So let me quickly search for one of the workstations. Oh, just a moment. All right. So when you're in the software section, you view all these softwares, right? So when you click on a specific software, you would be able to identify the software type, right? So from unidentified, you could mark it as an open source software or a freeware or an excluded software. Or if you feel that this particular software should not be used at any point of time, you could also mark it as a prohibited software depending on your requirement. And if you want to notify your system administrators, or if you want to notify the end user if somebody is using a prohibited software type, what you could do is under setup, you could navigate to automation. And under automation, you do have notification rules, you have assets as a tab right here, and you have software notifications. So from this section, you could enable this notification and ensure that a few technicians are notified if prohibited software installations are found. And also you could enable this particular option to notify users if any prohibited software installations are identified in their machines as well, right? So softwares, like I said, is not just available in this section, which is the scanned software list, but it is also available in within each and every single asset. So when you navigate to an asset under the software tab, you would be able to identify each and every single software which is defined in an asset. right? So that's how you keep a track on what types of softwares are available. Is it a prohibited software or an unidentified software or a managed software, right? So under software, you do see that there are, various types of software such as managed, unidentified, etc. And these fall under different category brackets such as development, operating system, etc. And you have an option right here which says software suites as well. So as and when a probe identifies a software suite, that would automatically be populated as a suite component in ServiceDesk Plus Cloud. And you have an option right here to add a new software suite, or you could add a new software from the scan software section right here. All right. So now, since you have all these softwares available in your Service Desk Plus Cloud application, how do you ensure that you are compliant, right? So when you click on any software, as we spoke about earlier, or as we saw earlier, the software type is unidentified, right? So from this section, you need to manage your software in order to ensure that you are compliant. So you mark it as managed, and you see that there are a list of options which are available for you. So you get to see the list of licensed installations versus unlicensed installations, and you see the license summary right here. So how many licenses are available, how many are allocated, how many are available for downgrades, etc. So right now there is no license right here, and that's why it says this is an under licensed software, right? So when you click on installations, you see that there are 5 unlicensed installations, which means there are 5 machines which are still using this particular software without a license. So when you navigate to license, as in when you procure your license, you could navigate to this section within a software, and you could add a new standard license. So depending on your requirement and depending on the license type which you have purchased, be it a CAL license, be it an enterprise license, or even a free or a trial license, right? You could go ahead and mark your license type. In this case, we have a handful of machines which requires a license. So let's go with volume for now. You get to choose your vendor if required. You have an acquisition date. So let's say that the software license is bought today and it expires probably next year on the same day. And if there's a purchase cost which you'd like to add, you could do that. If you have a specific department for which you're purchasing the software for, you could choose the department, you could associate it to a site, you could choose the number of installations allowed, for example, 5. And if there are any downgrade rights, you could allocate the downgrade rights right here. And when you click on save, you would notice that the license has been added right here. So the installations allowed are 5, and we are in the unlicensed installation compliance at the moment. So once you have added your license, you need to allocate your license to these assets. So when you click on this button, you get to allocate your licenses to your assets. And when you click on allocate license, that's going to change your compliance type to compliant. So this is how you ensure that your softwares are compliant at any point of time. So if you have extra licenses, for example, if you have mistakenly purchased 6 or 7 licenses in place of 5, and if you have only 5 installations which are currently available, this compliance type would be marked as an over licensed software. Over licensed compliance, right? So by keeping a track on this option, you get to see what is the level of usage and how many licensed or unlicensed installations are available in Service Desk Plus Cloud. So by running an audit anytime in future, or even if you face an audit, you could ensure that you are compliant. And by doing that, you could ensure that the right types of softwares are being identified and the prohibited softwares are being noticed, and they are being notified to separate technicians and and the end user who's using them. And you could also compare the software installations with the number of licenses, and you could ensure that you do not spend unnecessarily in your organization. And with that, you could ensure your software compliance as well. The next essential is tying up your IT asset management with other ITIL processes. So how is that done? As in when users use your workstations or use the assets, right? They are being tracked and the user's information is readily available. And as and when they report an issue, for example, I've logged in as an end user right here or a requester right here. So the name of the requester is Larry, and Larry holds a couple of assets right here, right? So if there is any issue in one of these, so Larry holds a server at the moment. So if there is any issue with this particular uh, server or an asset, Larry clicks on report an issue, go ahead and choose a particular template, right? And raise a request from this section. You do see that the asset is chosen from here. If you have multiple assets, you could choose it from this section as well, right? So once a request is created or an issue is reported, what happens is when you navigate to the, when you navigate back to the asset, so when you search for that asset's name, so Larry holds a production server. So when you navigate back to the asset, back to IT, workstations, and when you search for this particular device. So you can also search from this particular option. So I'm going to show you this option as well. So when you click here, you could search for your desired asset. And when you navigate to the asset which Larry is holding, you get to see what are the software details which is being owned by Larry. And you get to see the associated changes. So if there is any issue which Larry or the end user is reporting, you get to see what are the associated requests. So there is one pending request. So when you click on it, you get to see that there is a critical issue which is tied to it. And you have associated changes as well. So we do see that there are 5 open changes, 1 closed change. On the whole, there are 6 changes. So when you click here, you get to see the list of changes and what stages they are in, right? So apart from this, if there are any problems which are associated to this particular device or asset, that can also be tied and that would be visible under this section right here. So you have your requests, problems, and changes which could be tied up to your IT asset management. And what happens is, if this is a critical device or if this is a critical asset, right? How do you manage these, and how do you ensure that there is no impact for something else or some other server which is interconnected to this particular server or workstation, right? So in that case, you could make use of the CMDB module. You could convert your IT asset as a CI in the application. You could navigate to the CI, and what you need to do is when you enter the CI, you get an option to establish relationships. So for example, if this production server is holding a couple of other services, or if it handles a couple of other servers, or if it is even handling a couple of switches, or if it's located in a different region, how do you track all this and how do you ensure that everything is brought to one place together, right? So you have a relationship tab within the IT asset module to see who is the user who's using it, what are the assets monitors, and what are the business services it's connected to. And at any point of time, if you want to have a high level view of your IT asset, which is a CI in the CMDB module, you could make use of the relationship tab to view what are the connections and what are the services it hosts, where it's connected, etc., etc. Right? So we do see that there is this particular server is located in London. It's backed up by another workstation. It's connected to another computer, and a couple of services are running. So if you have numerous such relationships like this, you could make use of the relationship map, which is available right here. And by making use of the different view options right here, you could have a bird's eye view on what are the different services which are interconnected, and what could be a possible impact if something goes wrong with this particular server, right, or this particular CI. So when you click on this, you get the basic details of the CI. Or if you click on the file and folder service, you get a detail on the file and folder service which is associated to it. So this is how you click and expand on each and every single relationship to get a bird's eye view, so that if any issue goes on with this particular asset or CI, you could easily track what who is connected to it, who's managing the softwares, where is it located in, what is the backup which is available, and take necessary actions within a few minutes of time, right? So let's navigate back to our slide and see where we are. So the end users would be using the workstations, and as and when they report issues, you could tie them with various ITIL processes. And with the help of CMDB, you could ensure that you get a bird's eye view on all your IT assets as well. Right. So now since you have all these, you should ensure that you are tracking your metrics, right? So to ensure that you do not spend unnecessarily, what you could do is talking about costs, you could navigate to an asset, and within an asset, so this is a basic detail of an asset, right? So when you navigate to financials, you have an option to add your assets cost, and you could also add your depreciation as well. So depending on whatever depreciation method you have chosen, you could configure your depreciation and you could list them right here on an annual or a monthly basis as well, right? So this is how you configure costs in ServiceDesk Plus Cloud. And by making use of reports, so when you navigate to reports, you have asset loans. So talking about loans, you could also identify assets from the asset management module. Uh, you could identify users who have loaned a few assets. So under asset loans, you have loanable assets which could be marked. So from here, you could mark all the assets which are loanable, and you could create a loan registry. So as in when, for example, if I want to use a Mac machine for 1 week because of a demo, right? So I could go ahead and create a new loan, establish a timeline for the loan, right? So I could say I need this for 1 week, and if it's being assigned to a specific user, for example, Catherine in this case, I could use the options which are available and choose a user. For instance, if this user is not available, and if I want to have another user, for instance, Dave, to collect the asset on behalf of Catherine on a particular day, I could go ahead and say that the asset is being received by another user, and I could save this information. And you get to choose your assets from this section. So as in when I type an asset's name, it appears here. Or if you have your barcode scanner connected to your machine, you could, with your shooter, you could directly scan your barcodes and input your loanable assets right here. So that makes your work much simpler, and you get to add your new loans under the loan registry as well. So this gives you an insight on the loans, and this could be used under the asset loan reports at any point of time. You also have other customizable reports which could be used under new custom report, and as a part of the predefined reports, you get to calculate the assets depreciation or view the assets depreciation, or you also have an option to view various workstation summary reports or reports based on software. So softwares could be based on manufacturer, based on the different with different categories, and you also have an option to identify install softwares as well. So not just reports, you could make use of the dashboards as well to get a high level view on the assets which are being managed in your organization. So under the home tab, you have the asset dashboard. So this gives you a complete summary of all the IT assets and the non-IT assets which you own in your organization and what are the respective numbers. You also have workstations filtered by OS, filtered by department, site, region, etc., which can be viewed from this particular widget. And you also have an option where you could view your compliance from here as well. So how many under licensed softwares you have versus how many are compliant and how many are over licensed, right? So this is your asset dashboard. So similar to this, you also have a dashboard for software. So when you click on software, the software dashboard would populate, and right here you get to see the license agreement expiry. So as and when you have an agreement for your licenses, you could expect the license expiry information to populate here. You have all your different softwares such as managed, prohibited, um, unidentified versus other types, other custom types, if you have, would be listed right here. And if you have, if you have certain unlicensed installations versus unused software licenses, you get to view it from these widgets. And through this particular widget, you could ensure that you are compliant. So right now you have 22 organizations right here. You have 22 other unlicensed softwares and 6 over licensed softwares on the whole, right? So this is how you ensure that you make use of various metrics and ensure that you stay compliant at any point of time. You ensure that your loaned assets or assets are also um, tracked, and if there are any discrepancies, you could also perform an audit report and identify. And with these, you could ensure that you optimize your IT asset usage, and you get to know that if there are any unassigned workstation versus if there are any over assigned workstations. So one user might be using more than one machine. So in that case, you could quickly take a report and see who the user is, and check on that particular asset and have it reassigned or manage your assets accordingly. So you also have an option to continuously improve your IT asset management by making use of these metrics and by making use of the dashboard. So as in when you have your new purchase orders and your new assets which are coming in, so new assets can be, can come in by various methods. So you could either add it manually, you could go ahead and use different scanning techniques to bring them within the application, or if you have a CSV filled with the data, you could do an import as well. So you could manage all your assets by adding them in, and you could modify your states of assets to ensure that the proper asset life cycle is being followed. So you have an option to reassign the workstation to new users. So you might face a scenario where your users are leaving the organization, or when new users are being brought into the organization. So in that case, if you want to reassign the workstation to new users, you could simply change the states and make use of different customizable states as well to modify your assets usage. You could also have a track on the assets which are in repair, or if you're talking about licenses, you could also go ahead and modify the allocation of licenses, modify the types of licenses to ensure that you are compliant at any point of time, and you could face audits like a boss. And if there are any assets which are no longer in use, or if they are disposed, or if the agreement expires, you cannot use them anymore, and thereby you do a cleanup and ensure that your assets are in track at any point of time in your organization, right? So with that, let's take a quick look on how an educational institution has to upgrade from Windows 8 to the latest version. So Windows EOL'd the Windows 8 operating system in 2016, and the mainstream support had ended in Jan 2018. So an institution later discovers that there are several PCs and there are several computer labs which still run on the Windows 8 operating system, right? So how do you track, or how does the institution track all these? So these were the few challenges which they had faced. So drilling down, what are the assets which are vulnerable versus what are the softwares which are installed in those machines, and what are the list of prohibited softwares was a huge challenge. Rolling out such upgrades, such as an OS upgrade in this case, was a huge challenge for the institution. So how do you solve these challenges? So with the help of ServiceDesk Plus Cloud, you could create a single source of truth for all the software assets, right? So you could create, or the institution can directly use ServiceDesk Plus Cloud, download a probe, install a probe, identify all the assets in their institution, bring in all the institution into ServiceDesk Plus Cloud, track the assets, track the softwares which are available, and with the help of the software module, they could easily roll out an upgrade, right? So let's take, or they could easily manage an upgrade. So let's quickly navigate back to the software section. So when you click on assets, you do have various options on the left side. And when you click on software, that's going to populate the scan software for you, right? So let's click on scan software. So what the institution can do is the institution can navigate here, click on software, navigate to scan software, and search for Windows 8. So that would give an insight on how many installations are there versus how many machines are um, uh, you know are affected in this case. So Windows 8 is a compliant software which is available, and there are, for example, 5 licensed installations at the moment, right? So if they are going to perform an upgrade, right? So they could navigate to ServiceDesk Plus Cloud, and they could search for Windows 10, for example, which is a higher version. So let's navigate here, type for Windows, and type and search for Windows, and you get all the relevant keywords. Choose Windows 10. You get to see that there are let's see how many installations are there. You do have 2 licensed installations, and you have a couple of licenses right here. In this case, we need to purchase an upgrade license because the institution wants to upgrade from Windows 8 to Windows 10. So the manufacturer is Microsoft Corporation. If there's any vendor stated, you could choose the vendor. Under the soft upgrade from, you could search for Windows 8 based on this use case. So as an institution owner, what I could do is I could choose Windows 8. So we are upgrading from Windows 8 and we are upgrading to Windows 10. And based on the licenses which I've purchased, I could choose my license from the drop down list. And if there are any downgrade rights, it would automatically populate here along with the license key. If you have a new license key for this particular upgrade license which you are which you're configuring, you could have the license key listed right here as well, right? So that is how you can configure or manage your upgrade licenses as well in Service Desk Plus Cloud, and you could allocate the license to your unlicensed installations as well, and ensure that you are compliant at any point of time, right? So you could also make use of reports to track what are the devices which run a prohibited software at any point of time, or a lower version of the software, and manage one such upgrade situation. So here are a few features that can help you to manage or to face such challenges. So you could create a single source of truth. Basically, you need to discover all these assets by making use of the various discovery techniques we saw today. You could identify eligible licenses. You could classify the licenses in different types, and you get to see, or you get to identify the critical assets. So talking about critical assets, so if in case the organization or the institution has a critical server which is involved, right? So that might need a change in order to upgrade the OS on the whole. So you could navigate to the change module, and you could create a new change from this section. And what you could do is you could list the CI. If it is a critical asset, you would probably have a CI involved, so you could list the CI. Or you could if there are multiple assets involved, you could choose the assets involved from here as well. If there are other assets which are going to be impacted, that could also be mentioned right there. So let's quickly open an existing change which we have based on this use case. So this is a Windows upgrade, right? So since we are talking about a critical a machine or a critical asset which is going through one such upgrade, a change is created and it was successfully implemented. So if they want to identify what are the associations at any point of time, they could navigate here to the CIs involved. As in when you choose the CI, you get to see that there is a CI involved relationship map right here. So when you click here, the relationship map opens, and you get to see once again a bird's eye view on the CI which is involved versus what are the different connections and what are the different services which are being hosted. And as in when you click on the relationship extension right here, you get to see the other related or other interconnected relationships as well. So by doing this, you get to identify critical assets by making use of CMDB. And you could plan your license purchases. So by using KPIs, by either using the reports or by using the dashboard, you could see what are the types of licenses which you have versus what are being used and unused. So depending on the data which you have in ServiceDesk Plus Cloud under the reports and dashboards, you could plan your purchase and ensure that your spending is being limited, right? And you get to monitor these upgrade processes or upgradations, and you ensure that your softwares are in place and they are compliant by making use of the software summary check as well. So with that, we have come to the very end of today's masterclass. So I'm going to give you a quick recap on whatever we saw today. So procuring assets and enrolling them in ServiceDesk Plus Cloud by using various discovery techniques such as your asset scan, such as your network scan, your domain scan, and your scan scripts as well. We did see how you could identify and categorize all these assets in different sections or different filters. You could also track your relationships, manage cost and depreciation. You also can allocate assets to users, track the assets through different life cycles which you could make use of to to make use that they are configured in the right state and that they are being managed. You also have an option to govern these softwares efficiently, ensure compliance, and face audits at any point of time. You also can set up notifications for software policy violations, like how we saw, and you could alert a few key stakeholders about such policy violation softwares or prohibited softwares which are installed. And you could also notify the end users who are using them as well. And with the help of other ITIL processes, you could ensure that your IT asset management is being tracked and all your assets are in place, and that you ensure that by making use of KPIs and by making use of either the reports or dashboards, you stay compliant at any point of time and that you face an audit. So with that, we have come to the very end of the presentation for today. I just want to give you a quick heads up on the free product training and consultation which we offer. So you can get a 45-minute one-on-one training session with our product experts. And if you would like to avail this and if you would like to book your slots, please drop an email to itsmcas@manageengine.com. All right. Thank you so much once again for tuning into today's masterclass. If you have any further questions or if you need any further clarifications, please feel free to reach out to our support channel and one of our technicians would be always happy to assist you. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. You have a great day ahead. Thank you. Stay safe and bye-bye.